So then, we are back with more understandings from the Renewed Covenant, from the Aramaic English translation of the Word. This translation is from the original manuscripts of the Hebrews of old, from the time of the prophets of Israel, the prophets of Yahweh, giving us then directives for the future and what we should believe. Also related with the final war at the end. It is very important reminding ourselves there are the steps of formation from the time of Yirmiyahu the prophet. During the 61st chapter of Yirmiyahu, then he gives us step by step the development in the spirit of this era of rebuilding or restoration. Contrary to what many people believe, they think they can impose their system then to have peace. However, when there is heaven involved, people should be concerned in what not to do, because the plan is already set in place. So then, from the viewpoint of the Messiah and what he was explaining then regarding Daniel, regarding Yirmiyahu, regarding Yirmiyahu, regarding Ezekiel and Zechariah, you can understand every time heaven is involved, then each of those, they find the plans already in place. So then gives you what you should not do during the times where then Yahweh is in charge. From this viewpoint, we begin to understand this formation as then the time where we begin to realize any plan against the plan of the Creator regarding the time of the end goes against of whoever decides to make a plan against him. Some of the examples we find in Europe in terms of the Eurozone. The Eurozone was a contradiction of the prophecy of Daniel. Did it work? No, did not work. Lots of nations are busted over there and they are having trouble trying to stabilize the financial system, but then Daniel said they would try to come together, but they would not adhere to each other. So then they begin to understand what it means of the time of the end. Another factor is nations then trying to do the old junkies, maintaining what they used to have when the time has changed. The similitude comes from the time where the Messiah was then at the mountain. He was during the time of the 24th chapter of Yirmiyahu, the first gospel. Then he was explaining then regarding the temple and the city and what went on, because the Messiah was transitioning them from the first service and the second service. There was a transitional time taking place and the Messiah was then instructing them. However, they were born during the time of the first service, and they were expecting this Messiah to come and restore what then was the time of Shlimon, the great time of the king, where nations would come to Israel and they would hear the wisdom from Yahweh. This is what the people they were expecting at his time. However, it wasn't for this kingdom of this earth, it was for the kingdom to come government. So then the people had to be shaken away from what they held so dearly for so long. Though they were doing what the law said, mostly, but then they did not understand the concept of the Messiah, neither having the seclusion demanded by the law. As then the city in a desert, the city of God in a desert. So then when the promised land was given, there was merely a transfer of the tabernacle from the desert onto the promised land. And they began to train for more than 1,000 years. So when the Messiah came, would then be easy for him simply do the teaching, complete the spring feast, endow them with power from on high. Ruach HaKodesh would come on Shavuot, and then they would be functioning. But then a lot of people during the time, they were not prepared for the second tabernacle services. They wanted to stay with the first service, yet they want the kingdom restored. But then Yirmiyahu was explaining of the kingdom to come government. The Messiah would come and he would teach us then the kingdom to come government. However, when the people began to read the prophecies of Yirmiyahu, they thought, both of them, they taught and they thought. Then the Messiah would come to restore the existing kingdom of this earth. That's when they made a mistake. That's why the Messiah was rejected. So then they began to understand what it means, because then they had a relation with the kingdom as then the kingdom of Solomon or Shimon. They wanted the kingdom of Shimon to be restored. However, the Messiah was not then in tune with their schedule. He had a divine schedule. The king of Shimon was then performed to show the nations how it would be then in the future. It was an explanation to them what it would be like then in the new kingdom. So this kingdom then was used as a sample so they would understand. Then the primary objective of the entire nation was to prepare themselves for the second tabernacle services and then saving the Gentiles. However, the Messiah came and he was rejected because they wanted this kingdom of this earth then restored as per then the time of Shimon. But it wasn't the time. So the Messiah spoke. He then taught the Torah. However, he wasn't received because they wanted a king to take care of the nation, get rid of the Romans, and then establish the kingdom. But it is the kingdom to come government, not this kingdom. The time that they wished for, those times are gone. And that's when Israel made a mistake. They did not understand. And they are yet waiting for this king to come and restore them the kingdom. But they know he won't come. Not on those terms. He's returning, however, to rescue his people then for the kingdom to come. But he won't restore this kingdom. So then people are more acquainted to what to expect. And then the temple was not mandated. The temple was a gift from Shimon, because then David decided then to obey the laws of Yahweh and being obedient. So then he received the gift of the temple, but it was not mandated. What was mandated, however, was the tabernacle. That's why there's so many confusion for centuries. Where is the Messiah? He's to come, but he already came. Whatsoever was during the time of Shimon was only a sample of the kingdom to come government. And the Messiah, when he came, then he would help to prepare his people then to save the Gentiles. Then indicating the yet kingdom to come. So then it started making more sense. So Israel today, unfortunately, they are disobedient because they are expecting yet their kingdom to be restored, but it's not the time. And the restoration period has to be done first then with the cities being rebuilt, meant the second tabernacle services. When these are then rebuilt and they begin to pray, then the city of God in Jerusalem is going to be rebuilt. Then the temple is going to be rebuilt. But quite some time yet, because the cities must come first. First the cities, because then the last standing orders of the Messiah was then for them to go around the world and form holy cities. So these must return first, and then when they pray, then the holy city, the city of God in Jerusalem, would be rebuilt. These are the orders given by the Messiah. They can't do otherwise. In any transitional time, people have a tendency to go back to the old junkies. But then the Messiah said there is a transitional time going on, and we are transitioning again from lies back to the truth. So then when you read in Revelation regarding then sometimes 1,260 days and times and half a time and time, some of those are related with the seasons, feasts, but those from the time of the prophet. So when you begin to do the calculation, you have to end up during the time then of the vengeance. Some of those numbers, they must relate with the time where they were spoken until the time of the vengeance. So then you begin to understand what takes place during the time of the vengeance, 490 days. So then it becomes a whole lot easier for you to understand what takes place. So then, when the Messiah was born, he was born already as a king. So there is a start of counting of time. Then you count 1,000 years until his people then were in the cities, and the cities were destroyed. 1,009. You find then the record in 1,009. The Muslims came to Jerusalem, they destroyed the city, and they destroyed the tomb. By that time, no more cities. So came a shift in the spirit where then Satan became the deceiver, and he deceived the entire world. So then 1,000 years has gone by, and then ended in 2009. So we are then transitioning ourselves back to the truth. Then later when the combat, then prior of it, and then with the release of the atomic weapon, you find then Satan the destroyer is going to be released. But then he knows he has a short time, so he's going to try to deceive the nations again. He's going to remind them of the old junkies, in order to gather them against the holy cities. Now, this is what it is. Read it for what it is. So then when you understand the time of the seed, you understand 1,000 years. However, later, when the atomic bomb is blasted, then you find Satan the destroyer being released, and then vengeance. Vengeance to come. Then starts the vengeance. The whole situation is layered properly so then you can understand the events. But as per time and season and prophecy, not by verses and chapters and then chronological. It's not chronological. So then 1,000 years of deceit, we are then back into the truth. Later then, much later, when the war then starts, then the atomic bomb comes. Then the pit. Try to understand, the pit is where then the bomb hits the ground. That's the pit. It's not in the spiritual dark forces somewhere in the space. No, because you are uniting then the actual events of the earth based upon the prophecies spoken. So when the atomic bomb hits the ground and makes the hole, that's the pit. So whatsoever you hear from the pit, then you understand is the atomic blast. So then when Satan is released from the prison, the time of the atomic blast. That's when then he is released, his fatted seed of destroyer. He's released. So then what does he do? He has to deceive the nations. That's his character. He's going to remind them of the old junkies. Then the old junkies, they make sure then the military gets mixed with the old junkies. Then they go around the world deceiving the nations, reminding them of the old junkies. And then the old junkies, they get joined up with the military. And then both of them, they join up against the holy cities. And then vengeance goes on. While this tremendous momentous time goes on, then the sounds of the shofars. Then you have the first sound, then the second sound, and the third sound. And then obviously along with them comes the seals. And then later comes the pouring of the cups. Those are specific time judgments coming upon the earth. So people coming from the 1,000 years of deceit are these very people. They are going to destroy the earth. Because they do believe the old junkies. Because the Messiah said then, those who are of Yahweh, they maintain His holy instructions. They show up at the gates often for further instructions. So then, later, when we read then after the Messiah ascended, we read then that the beast will try to change the times and the seasons, and he did change. Thus the time of deceit. So much later, they're going to join up in a false religion system, join up with the military against the holy cities. And that's then the war of the end. True anointing versus false anointing. And then when there is this pit, comes then a whole understanding of the releasing of the spiritual powers. Comes then the judgment of the spiritual powers upon those who are linked with them. And then you find distinct aspects of each of them. So then when you read the Torah, if you don't love the Torah, if you don't like the Torah, if you don't obey the Torah, in enlightenment of then the second tabernacle services via grace, if you don't encourage the Hebraic people then to return to their holy services, then you are going to be the very group of old junkies against the holy cities. And at the very end, when the Messiah shows up, then you are going to be burned. Because this world, this age is going to be ended by a shower of sulfur. So when the whole world then is joined up together to destroy the holy cities, then the Messiah shows up. Then he's going to save the holy cities and the beloved city, those who are then faithful to the Messiah, and then shower of sulfur. So then the false religion, false prophet, those then encouraging the false Messiah, false anointing, those are going to be destroyed. So the Torah remains. Please stay tuned, much more coming up, because then later we have to kind of divide it up what it means, then those many symbolisms of then judgments and then vengeances coming from the many aspects of the symbolism, because some of the people are going to be vindicated for what they believe. Then comes then the evil, because they twisted what they thought was holy, then they're going to be vindicated. Comes then the evil vindicated upon the people at the same time. So those who are then half there and half the other, they're going to get double damned. From the part of the evil, from the part of not evil, but what they thought was proper, and then comes the judgment. Please stay tuned, much more coming up.